My name's Josh. I'm 32, and I guess if there's one lesson I keep having to learn the hard way, it's this. Never expect people to treat you the way you treat them, especially not family. Growing up, my younger brother Mason was always the golden boy. He got the shiny praise, the leniency, the hand-me-down money that never made it to me. But I never really held it against him. He was charming in a loud, clumsy kind of way, and I was always the quiet one, the one who stayed late at family dinners washing the dishes while Mason snuck out for beers with his buddies. I didn't mind it then. I just figured that's what older brothers did. A few years ago, I started my own graphic design firm. Things were rough in the beginning, I'll admit. I ate a lot of instant noodles and passed on a lot of sleep. But eventually, I found a groove, landed some big contracts, and built up something steady. My parents never really asked much about it, and that was fine. I'd stopped expecting validation. Mason, on the other hand, pinged me every few months with business ideas, most of which involved me doing free branding for his friends' questionable ventures. I helped when I could. And when he announced he was getting married, I was genuinely happy for him. Now, the wedding, this is where things get twisted. Mason called me up 6 months before the big day. "Josh, man, I really need your help," he said. "Claire wants this huge venue, like fairy tale stuff. But we're short about 15 grand after deposits." I should have hesitated, but I didn't. That's what older brothers do, right? I wired the money 2 days later. No questions asked. Not as a loan. Not even as a wedding gift. I told him outright, "Don't worry about it. My gift to you both." He sounded stunned, grateful. And for a while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I'd finally earned a little appreciation from my family. The next few months, I helped with vendor coordination, proofread invitations, even designed the wedding website for free. I was in the trenches with them. I never got a thank you from Claire, but I chalked it up to stress. She always struck me as a little high-strung. Perfectionist. Everything had to be her way or nothing. Then came the rehearsal dinner. My parents barely acknowledged me. My mom was too busy gushing over how beautifully everything came together thanks to Claire's vision, and my dad seemed more invested in the caterer's wine list than in anything I had to say. At one point, Claire's father made a toast and said something like, "This wedding is a result of true family coming together to make dreams happen." Everyone clapped. I raised my glass, half expecting Mason to glance my way. He didn't. He was already whispering something to Claire and laughing. Still, I swallowed it. I told myself I was overthinking, that it wasn't about credit. That being there, supporting them, that was what mattered. The morning of the wedding, I showed up early, dressed, groomed, and ready to help out wherever needed. Claire's bridesmaids were fussing over decorations and hair curlers and emergency stain wipes. I asked one of them where I was supposed to sit for the ceremony. She blinked at me like she had no idea who I was and told me to ask someone on the groom's side. Fine. Eventually, I found my place. 4th row. Not bad. Close enough to smile politely and clap at the right times. I tried not to let the slide eat at me, but it did. Because I'd overheard one of Claire's cousins, a girl who hadn't contributed a dime, complaining that she was only seated in the 3rd row and how she'd expected to be closer to the aisle since she had better Instagram angles from there. The ceremony happened. It was beautiful, I'll admit, even if I did feel like a prop in the background. Then came the reception. That's where the real gut punch landed. When I walked into the ballroom, I scanned the guest list board for my name. Took me a minute. I finally spotted it, scribbled in a corner under table 17. I didn't even know there were 17 tables. Turns out, there weren't. There were 16 full setups, and one half table tucked awkwardly behind a partition near the kitchen entrance, practically next to a swinging staff door. I approached a server and asked if it was a mistake. "Oh, nope," she said, avoiding my eyes. "That's the overflow section." Overflow. Like I was some last-minute tag-along. I found my spot, between a cousin I barely recognized and someone from Claire's work who immediately opened a laptop and started answering emails. I sat down stunned. Numb. There were no decorations on the table. No centerpiece. The water hadn't even been poured. I was about to get up and talk to Mason when Claire appeared out of nowhere in full bridal glam and walked straight toward our table. "Oh, Josh," she said sweetly, like she just remembered I existed. "So glad you could come." I stood up, tried to smile, and said, "Hey, congrats again. Quick question, though. Did the seating get messed up?" Her face didn't even flicker. "Nope. We just figured this was the best spot." "You know," her smile thinned. "So you wouldn't ruin the photos." I blinked. "What?" You wear a lot of dark colors, she said, gesturing vaguely at my charcoal suit. And the aesthetic is really important to me. Mason said you'd understand. Then she was gone. Just like that. I stood there for a moment, processing. The background clatter of dishes and servers shouting orders felt louder than it should have. I wasn't sure if I was embarrassed or humiliated. My face burned. My ears rang. Then, slowly, I walked outside. The venue manager was by the side entrance, speaking into a walkie-talkie. I waited until he finished and then calmly introduced myself. Hi, I'm Josh. I'm the one who paid the final balance for this wedding. He raised an eyebrow. Oh, right? Yeah, big help. Everything was pending until that came through. Appreciate it. I nodded once. Quick question. If I were to withdraw payment, say, call the card company and reverse it, what would happen? He blinked, then gave a tight smile. Well, we'd shut it all down. Immediately. Even if it's mid-reception? Especially then. That's in the policy. We only keep events running if final payment clears. And yours was the final payment. I pulled out my phone. He looked at me again, more carefully this time. You sure about this? I looked through the glass doors behind him. Through the glittery chandelier lights, I saw Mason and Claire in the middle of the dance floor, starting their first dance. Everyone was watching, smiling, clapping. No one had noticed I was gone. I pressed the call button and put the phone to my ear. The call connected in 2 rings. Hi, this is Sarah from Landmark Venue Services. How can I help you today? I kept my voice steady. Hi, Sarah. I need to cancel a payment that was processed this week for the Windmere Ballroom under the name Josh Callahan. It was for a wedding reception happening right now. There was a brief pause. Then, the tone in her voice changed. Mr. Callahan, are you requesting a formal reversal? Yes. Immediate cancellation. I understand the terms. I've just been informed this was charged inappropriately. I could hear her typing quickly. Understood. We'll notify the event coordinator and begin shutdown protocols as outlined. You'll receive a confirmation email within the hour. Thank you, I said simply. She sounded a little breathless when she replied. You're sure you want this to go into effect right now? I looked through the window one more time. The DJ had just announced the first dance song, some generic slow ballad. Mason looked happy. So did Claire. But I didn't feel anything anymore. Not warmth. Not anger. Just a cold, quiet switch that had flipped. I'm sure, I said, then hung up. The venue manager got the update within 2 minutes. He nodded to me, gave a small shrug like he wasn't thrilled to be the messenger, then tapped his walkie-talkie. From there, it all unraveled like a slow-motion disaster. First, the staff stopped refilling drinks. The bar was shuttered. Guests started noticing when the lights above the dessert table dimmed and didn't come back on. Then the DJ's speakers cut mid-song. Just a soft pop, then silence. I stayed just outside the glass doors, arms crossed, watching the chaos begin. Mason looked confused. Claire was mid-twirl when the power to the ambient floor lights died, leaving only a dim overhead glow. Whispers spread through the room like wildfire. Guests pulled out their phones. Some chuckled awkwardly. Others looked annoyed. Then the real scene hit when the catering staff began packing up. Rolling trays, half-served entrees, even the wedding cake was wheeled back behind the divider curtain. Someone tried to stop one of the servers, and I heard her say plainly, "We've been instructed to shut down." Final payment was reversed. It's in the contract. Claire's mother marched toward the venue manager. Mason was chasing down the DJ. My parents, who had conveniently ignored me all day, were now standing in the middle of the room, dumbfounded. That's when Mason finally spotted me, through the window. His face was a mix of confusion, panic, and disbelief. He came storming outside like a man trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Josh, he barked. What is going on? I stayed perfectly still. You canceled the payment? Are you out of your mind? I tilted my head. Funny, I was thinking the same thing about you letting your wife sit me by the kitchen. He blinked, momentarily thrown off. She didn't mean anything by that. He flailed, scrambling. It was just seating logistics, man. We were trying to keep things aesthetic. You mean she didn't want me ruining the photos? My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. After I paid for almost half the wedding. Mason's mouth opened, then closed. You didn't pay for half. I paid the final $15,342 when no one else could. You said you were desperate. You said Claire was heartbroken. You begged. He rubbed his face. Josh, come on, man. You can't just pull the plug like this. I didn't want to. But your bride made it clear where I stood in this family. He looked around wildly, as if expecting someone to step in and fix it. Look, I'll talk to Claire. I'll make this right. Just call the venue. Put the payment back. Please. I raised my phone and showed him the call log. Too late. It's already done. Inside, I saw the staff beginning to dim the main lights. Claire was standing by the dance floor, holding her bouquet like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Her makeup looked perfect, except now it was smeared at the corners. She was crying. I should have felt sorry. But all I felt was years of quiet, buried hurt finally breaking the surface. You know, I said softly, I never asked for credit. I didn't want a speech or a banner or a seat at the head table. I just wanted to be treated like a human being. Like your brother. Not like some disposable guest behind the kitchen wall. Mason was silent. Instead, I was told to sit down, shut up, and stay out of the pictures. He looked at me then, really looked. And I think, for the first time in our lives, he saw me not as a convenient safety net, but as someone who finally had the power to walk away. Please, he said again. We can fix this. No, I replied. You can deal with it. Then I turned, walked away from the chaos, and didn't look back. The last thing I heard as I headed toward my car was Claire screaming my name through the door, followed by the flicker of full light shutting off, just as the cake knife was supposed to come out. By the time I reached my car, the muffled chaos from inside the venue had turned into something more surreal than explosive, the kind of confused hush that happens when no one knows whether to scream or pretend everything's fine. It was like watching a ship sink in slow motion, and everyone still had champagne flutes in their hands, too polite or stunned to admit the water was rushing in. I sat behind the wheel but didn't start the engine. My hands rested on the steering wheel, unmoving, while I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. It wasn't satisfaction I saw in my face. Not really. It wasn't regret either. If anything, it was exhaustion. The kind that sits deep in your chest, built up over years of biting your tongue and shrinking yourself down just to keep peace in a family that only saw you when they needed something. My phone buzzed. Then again, and again. I glanced down. Mason, 2 missed calls. Mom, 1 text. Dad, 1 voicemail. Unknown number, 1 call. Probably Claire. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened the family group chat, the one that had gone mostly silent unless someone needed help moving furniture, watching their dog, or fixing a tech issue. The same chat where no one had congratulated me when my firm signed its biggest client. Where Claire had posted countless wedding updates and tagged everyone except me in the photos. I scrolled through it slowly. Then, I typed 1 message. Consider this my final contribution. I won't be attending Thanksgiving or Christmas. I wish you all the best. Please don't contact me again. Simple. Clear. No drama. No insults. I hit send. A minute later, the message was marked read by everyone. But no one replied. Not right away, at least. 10 minutes passed. The phone buzzed again. Mom texted, Josh, what have you done? Your brother's devastated. The guests are horrified. Do you understand what you've caused? I didn't respond. Then came the second message, this time from my father. You embarrassed the family. You humiliated your brother on the most important day of his life. What is wrong with you? That one stung more than I expected. Not because it was harsh, but because it was predictable. Because even now, after everything, he didn't ask why I did it. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't wonder how I felt being shoved in the corner and treated like an afterthought. He just blamed me for not playing along, for not being the quiet, reliable son who kept paying for everyone else's spotlight. I locked the screen and finally started the engine. The quiet hum of the car was grounding, soothing, like the world was finally under my control again. I drove for a while with no destination in mind. Just followed the roads, the streetlights, the feeling of the city breathing around me. At a red light, my phone buzzed 1 last time. Mason texted, Josh, please. I didn't know she said that to you. I swear. I never wanted you to feel excluded. Can we just talk? Please. I stared at the message for a long moment. Part of me wanted to believe him. But I thought back to the last 6 months. All the calls about money. The way he disappeared from the planning the second I wired the funds. The lack of even a thank you when the final invoice cleared. The toast where I was invisible. The seating chart. The way he never looked for me until something went wrong. And most of all, the way Claire had said it so casually, so you don't ruin the photos. Like it was a joke. A harmless little remark she never expected would reach a breaking point. It wasn't about one moment. It was about all of them. The light turned green. I didn't reply. Instead, I kept driving past the neighborhoods we grew up in, past the park where Mason had broken his arm falling off the monkey bars, past the street where Claire's parents lived in that pretentious faux colonial house she loved showing off. I ended up at a beach overlook just outside the city. The kind of place where you could park, roll down the windows, and listen to the waves. I sat there for a while, letting the wind roll in off the water. My suit jacket was wrinkled, the tie loosened. I took it off and tossed it in the back seat. That's when I realized something. I hadn't taken a single photo at the wedding. Not of the ceremony, not of the food, not of the flowers or the vows or the first dance. But I didn't feel like I missed anything. If anything, I finally felt seen, even if it was just by myself. That night, I stayed in a small coastal inn. No texts, no calls. I left the phone charging on silent, face down. And for the first time in a long time, I slept straight through the night without waking up once, heart racing from a dream about someone needing something I couldn't give. The next morning, I woke up to the kind of silence that didn't feel empty, just peaceful. No buzzing phone, no voices outside my door. Just the soft rush of wind and the low rumble of waves in the distance. For the first time in years, I didn't feel obligated to do anything for anyone. I made coffee in the little inn kitchenette, sat on the patio in my undershirt, and watched the tide come in. It felt like the first breath after holding it underwater for too long. But of course, the world doesn't pause just because you do. When I finally checked my phone, I had over 40 missed calls, dozens of texts, and a few voicemails, mostly from family. Some from numbers I didn't recognize. I skipped most of them, but one voicemail caught my attention. It was from Claire's father. "Josh, this is Donnie, Claire's dad. I think we need to have a conversation. What you did last night was completely inappropriate and immature. You owe my daughter an apology. And frankly, we may be exploring legal action if those funds aren't restored immediately. Call me back." I laughed. Out loud. Alone. The audacity, legal action over a reversed payment for services that were never completed? Over money I'd gifted them when they couldn't afford their own fantasy wedding? Claire's dad, a man who couldn't even look me in the eye at the rehearsal dinner, now demanding I apologize? That call told me everything I needed to know about how they'd spun the narrative overnight. Still, I was curious. I opened social media and searched for the wedding hashtag Claire had plastered across every invitation. Hashtag Forever Feldmans. At first, it was exactly what I expected. Glamorous shots from earlier in the day, floral arrangements, posed bridal party photos, videos of the outdoor ceremony before the reception disaster. But as I scrolled, the vibe shifted. Fast. A video from a guest showed the moment the music cut during the first dance. People looking around, confused. Claire mouthing, "What's happening?" before rushing off the dance floor. Another post featured the buffet being wheeled away with the caption, "Wait, is this part of the show?" Then came the speculation. Someone posted, "So apparently the groom's brother paid for the whole thing," and then pulled the plug mid-reception. "No way this is real," laughing emoji, hashtag Forever Feldmans. And another reply, "Claire made a comment about him being bad for photos?" I heard it at table 12. She did him dirty. It was unraveling publicly. Claire's perfect Pinterest wedding had turned into a meme overnight. The kind you can't scrub off the internet. I turned off my phone again and took another sip of coffee. I didn't feel triumphant. Just calm. I stayed at the inn for 2 more nights. No contact. No emails. No calls returned. On the 3rd day, I went home. I was barely through the door when the buzzer rang. It was Mason. He looked like he hadn't slept. His suit was wrinkled, the collar undone, eyes red and puffy. I opened the door and leaned against the frame. "Hey," he said, voice hoarse. "Can we talk?" I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside and let him in. He sat on the edge of my couch, hands clasped like he was praying, but I could see they were shaking. "I'm not here to make excuses," he said. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Really? I should have noticed. I should have stood up for you." I didn't know she said that. I didn't know where they seated you. I let Claire take over everything and I thought, "I don't know, man. I thought you were just being chill about it." Like always. I sat across from him, arms folded. "And when it all went down," he continued, "I told her we had to call you. That you were the reason we even had a venue. She just kept saying you overreacted. She doesn't get it." "No," I said quietly. "She doesn't." He looked up at me. "I'm not asking you to fix anything. Just, can you believe me when I say I didn't mean for it to be like that?" I let the silence hang. Then finally, I said, "I believe you didn't plan it, but you allowed it. You handed over the reins, stepped back, and didn't think twice about where that left me. And that's kind of the story of our whole life, isn't it? Mason's eyes dropped. He nodded slowly. I needed to draw a line, I added. For my sake. Not to embarrass you. Not to ruin anything. But because I finally realized you all don't see me unless I'm solving your problems. I see you, he said, almost pleading. Now I do. It was the most honest thing he'd said in years. And I knew he meant it. But honesty doesn't always equal forgiveness. I'm not coming back to the family, I said. Not now. Maybe not ever. I don't want to be part of a dynamic where I'm only valued when I'm useful. I'm done with that version of us. He nodded again. A tear rolled down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. I understand. We sat in silence for a few more moments. Then he stood, walked to the door, and paused. For what it's worth, he said, hand on the doorknob, Claire and I were separating. She said some things after the wedding. Things I can't ignore. I said nothing. He looked at me one last time. Thanks for being honest with me, even if it hurts. Then he left. The weeks that followed were quieter than I'd ever known. No group texts. No birthday reminders. No holiday invites. But I wasn't lonely. I got back to work. Started a new side project I'd been putting off for years, a mentorship program for kids interested in digital art and design. Something meaningful. Something mine. And eventually, word got around. My cousin Rachel reached out to say she saw everything that happened at the wedding and thought it was awful. She asked if I wanted to grab lunch sometime. Just her. No strings. I said yes. Others trickled in. Old friends I'd lost touch with. Colleagues who'd watched the wedding chaos go viral and quietly reached out to say, good for you. I rebuilt my circle. A better one. And one day, about 6 months later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photo. It was me, Mason, and Claire from the early engagement party, before things went off the rails. I was smiling, genuinely. Mason had his arm slung over my shoulder. Claire was mid-laugh. On the back, someone had written in careful handwriting, I'm sorry I made you feel invisible. I hope someday we can try again. I put the photo in a drawer. Not to forget, but to remind myself that I can forgive without returning to the same patterns. And that sometimes, walking away doesn't mean burning bridges. It just means learning not to cross the same one twice. Because this time, I didn't ruin the photos. They did that all on their own.